They have no navy. It's been knocked out. Those were the words of US President Donald Trump on March 3rd, following 48 hours that had utterly ruined Iran's naval fleet. Iran challenged the US. That was a mistake. Bombs and missiles flew and Iran's entire fleet was wiped out in just 2 days. This is historically bad for Iran, and it's only going to get worse for a regime that is collapsing before our eyes. After initial American and Israeli strikes on Iran wiped out a huge chunk of the country's leadership, Iran responded with attacks on several US military bases. Okay, the US said, "We see your base attacks and we'll raise you with the destruction of your entire naval fleet." US Tomahawks flew in an operation that overwhelmed any strategy that Iran's navy had, and the results speak for themselves. Iran has lost 11 of its warships, along with several of its attack submarines, and the US has unleashed a devastating wave of firepower that serves as a reminder to Iran's crumbling regime, as if one was needed, that anything Iran can try is just going to be met with a bigger and far more devastating response from the US. In a few minutes, we're going to explain how the US left Iran's entire navy crippled in just 48 hours. Before we do, let's take a deeper look at the results. We can sum it up in 7 words: the Gulf of Oman has been emptied. That's according to the US Central Command, or CENTCOM, which took to X to explain what it pulled off in just 2 days. 2 days ago, the Iranian regime had 11 ships in the Gulf of Oman. Today they have 0. The Iranian regime has harassed and attacked international shipping in the Gulf of Oman for decades. Those days are over, CENTCOM declared. There's a hint here about why the US took aim at Iran's navy. We'll get into later, but the big news here is that some of Iran's most important warships are out of the war just days into the fight, destroying Iran's naval posture in an instant. And we don't have to take CENTCOM's word for it. Satellite photographs are already emerging that showcase the scale of the damage that America's strikes have caused. The Iris Makran, which is Iran's first forward-based ship, is down. That vessel was struck while it was moored in Bandar Abbas, naval news reports. And it means that the US has taken out what was once an oil tanker, but has since become a military vessel capable of supporting helicopter operations. With a displacement of 120,000 tons, the Iris Makran was among the largest vessels in the Middle East region. Now, satellite photographs show fires on its berth and smoke streaming out of the warship's central portion. A Jamaran-class corvette that was stationed at a pier in Chabahar has also been taken out, armed with anti-ship and surface-to-air missiles along with torpedoes. This type of ship was supposed to be central to Iran's naval strategy. Iran has 6 of them, and at least one now stuck at Konarak Naval Base with smoke streaming out of it. The list goes on and on. The Telegraph reveals that satellite imagery captured by Planet Labs shows the Bandar Abbas region, where at least 11 of Iran's warships were docked as recently as February 22nd, is now blanketed in a smog of thick black smoke following America's heavy bombing campaign. The remains of the Iris Makran can be seen in the photos that the Telegraph shares. However, the biggest hit came against Iran's best warship, the Iris Shahid Bagheri. The closest thing that Iran has to an aircraft carrier, the Iris Shahid Bagheri, is the center of Iran's mobile drone threat. Referred to by WION as a mothership, the vessel has been used by Iran to launch drones at US bases and Gulf countries from the moment that the US campaign against Iran began. Like the Iris Makran, the Iris Shahid Bagheri started life as a commercial ship that Iran converted into a warship, which perhaps gives us an idea of why Iran's navy isn't all that the country's regime needed it to be. What we've seen over the past 48 hours is what weapons built for war can do when they target commercial ships converted for war. The UK Defence Journal adds that the Iris Shahid Bagheri has also been converted to launch and retrieve helicopters, making it an even bigger threat than its drone usage implies. But now it's gone. I guess you could say it's the first aircraft carrier to be sunk since World War II, Cappy Army says Riley in his coverage of the US blitz of Iran's naval assets. That might be a little bit of a stretch, at least when comparing the Iris Shahid Bagheri to US carriers such as the USS Abraham Lincoln, which has been playing a key role in this story. But the warship was among Iran's best, and its loss will sting because it means that the country's strategy of unleashing drones against America's bases and vessels has just taken a massive hit. Already reeling, Iran's regime would have been wondering how it could get any worse during the 48 hours of destruction that the US unleashed. It could get worse, and it did. The Telegraph explains, reporting, US forces have also mostly destroyed the headquarters of the Iranian naval fleet in the port of Bandar Abbas, while Ali Shamkhani, an admiral in Iran's elite Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC), has been killed in an Israeli airstrike. So Iran has lost its entire fleet in the Gulf of Oman. Its naval headquarters has been devastated, and one of its top admirals is 6 feet under. This isn't just bad for Iran, it's historically bad. And there will be Iranians of a certain age who will feel a massive sense of déjà vu right now. Iran has been here before, watching on helplessly as the US crippled the country's entire fleet. This has to feel like Operation Praying Mantis, only with a major twist that we'll explain if you stick with us. During the late 1970s and into the 80s, Iran made a habit of attacking the US. 1979 saw Iranian revolutionaries take 52 Americans hostage, holding them for 444 days. The US launched the Desert One rescue mission, which failed catastrophically and left 8 US service members dead. In 1983, an Iranian suicide bomber killed 241 US Marines and sailors in Beirut. And 4 years later, the US experienced more Middle East humiliation when an Iraqi jet attacked the USS Stark, killing 37 US sailors. Then came April 18, 1988. Operation Praying Mantis was launched, and in a matter of hours, the US destroyed a pair of Iranian oil platforms, a missile boat, 2 frigates, and 3 armed speedboats. In a matter of hours, half of Iran's navy had been crippled in what was the worst blow delivered in modern times to a navy that had existed since the First Persian Empire over 2,500 years ago. Note the word was. Operation Praying Mantis will feel like a picnic compared to what just happened to Iran's navy. Now here's the twist. While older Iranians will be feeling a sense of déjà vu over what just happened, they'll also be asking themselves how it happened at all. Iran has been preparing for this type of fight with the United States ever since Operation Praying Mantis. That single day led to a complete rewrite of Iranian naval doctrine to ensure that nothing like the 1980s embarrassment would ever happen again. They came up with a plan to overwhelm American ships with swarms of fast attack boats, Cappy Army explains, adding, "They planned to fire land-based anti-ship missiles at US forces. They had a whole strategy of using their submarines to ambush US vessels." Knowing that it couldn't stack up to the US on the pure naval firepower front, Iran had developed a layered and asymmetric strategy that was supposed to see its fast attack boats slip in and out of range, delivering shots as they went, all while Iran's submarines and missiles pelted anything that the US sent Iran's way. But nothing went according to Iran's plan. And the reason why is that Iran had been preparing for an attack like Operation Praying Mantis, and the US delivered something entirely different. But before we go deeper into that, if this is the kind of insight you want more of, make sure you're subscribed to the Military Show. We break it down like this every single week. Iran's biggest problem during America's 48-hour blitz of its navy was that it never saw the particular tactics that the US used coming. A naval doctrine created in the 1990s to counter the type of threat that ruined Iran's navy in the late 80s was never going to work. Iran had planned for what amounted to a ship-to-ship fight, which is where its fast attack boats would have a chance to excel. The Iranian regime thought its navy would be able to confine the much larger US ships in constricted waters, such as the Strait of Hormuz, which we'll be covering in a few minutes. Stuck in those waters, America's ships would be sitting ducks for the missiles launched from the fast boats, along with torpedoes fired by submarines and drones launched from Iran's makeshift aircraft carriers. But by 2026, the US knew what Iran was going to do. Persistent drone coverage combined with other forms of intelligence meant that the US knew where Iran's boats were at all times. Iranian warships haven't been able to get close to what the US has sent to the Persian Gulf region because military tech, as surprising as this appears to have been for Iran, has advanced since the 1990s. So has America's strategy. Iran ended up bringing a knife to a gunfight, and the US said, "Screw you." America wasn't about to play the fast boat game. Its strategy was simple and utterly devastating. Ruin Iran's fleet using Tomahawk missiles launched from so far away that Iran's entire naval strategy wouldn't be able to make it out of port. The US used the anti-ship missiles that Iran was expecting it to use during Operation Praying Mantis. But in 2026, as part of Operation Epic Fury, the US unleashed Tomahawk cruise missiles at Iran's navy. Those missiles have a much longer standoff range than anything that Iran expected the US to use, which means the warships and platforms used to launch them never get within range of Iran's warships. The Iris Makran was a casualty of this very strategy, as Tomahawk missiles launched from hundreds of miles away slammed into the ship, one after the other and in such rapid succession that whatever defenses Iran had loaded into the vessel never had a chance to stop what the US unleashed. Those Tomahawks were likely launched by the Ali Burke-class destroyers that Iran expected to be getting up close and personal with its fast attack boats, and with their 1,600-kilometer or around 1,000-mile range, those missiles were the only thing that Iran's idling warships saw before they were destroyed. Iran was waiting for America's warships to arrive so that it could put its naval doctrine into practice. What it got was a horde of powerful missiles, and Iran's sinking navy never even saw the ships that fired them. Then there was the follow-up. Max Afterburner explains in his examination of America's 48 hours of epic fury, stating, "With Iran's navy basically being a pincushion at this point, soaking up these Tomahawk missiles, F-35s followed up, likely with JDAM bombs, for precision cleanup. This was a genius strategy by the US. It subverted Iran's expectations by striking Iran's warships from afar, and when those ships were already in disarray, the US got up close and personal in ways that Iran never expected. This wasn't a naval battle. It was demolition of a force that had been set up specifically to counter a type of threat that the US never intended to present. And it led to America negating every tactic that Iran had in just 48 hours. As the US Naval Institute, or USNI, reveals, the US has been geared up for Iran's naval tactics for years, which is what has led to America conducting such a destructive campaign against Iran's navy. Iran has flaunted this asymmetric naval force of missile, midget submarines, naval mines, and anti-ship missile batteries in its threats to shut down the Strait of Hormuz in previous years. American naval forces in the region have been geared against these swarm threats, including Hellfire-armed Seahawk helicopters aboard Abraham Lincoln, USNI says. The mention of the Strait of Hormuz brings us back to what we mentioned about Iran's strategy of constricting US warships and why it all fell apart for the regime. However, what we're now seeing may not quite be what you think you're seeing. On the surface, America's firestorm of Tomahawk fury